Hello and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. Last month, health authorities planned a 10-point enhancement to support mental health needs, although the focus was for severe cases of mental disorder brought about by the recent violent crimes in the city. Migrant domestic workers contribute to the well-being of Hong Kong families, but are left out of the discussion on mental health priority. Their issues often going under the radar, with many turning to their own communities for support in absence of official assistance. The same reality spans across all non-ethnic Chinese communities in the city, which account for 8% of the population. How can we make sure that migrant worker communities in the city get more streamlined access to mental health services? And how can we tie together all the interconnected nuances in order to enhance integration, including streamlining Chinese learning, frontline outreach to non-ethnic Chinese communities, and improving mental health understanding overall in society? Joining me today to discuss the topic is the chairperson of the Hong Kong Equal Opportunities Commission, Ricky Chu. Mr. Chu, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
During the pandemic, employment instability was not only, it affected everybody in the community, not just migrant workers, but they faced a disproportionate amount of impact for travel restrictions. Families cannot go back to their hometown to see their loved ones. Could you talk about how that was a disproportionate impact to the communities of non-Chinese ethnic communities?
Yeah, indeed, you have rightly pointed out the issue. Although the pandemic hits Hong Kong indifferently, but in fact, as far as domestic workers, particularly those from the foreign countries, the migrant domestic workers are concerned, their special circumstances at work would render them suffer more than ordinary workers in Hong Kong for a number of reasons. First, many of the migrant workers, they come to work here alone without their family. And during the pandemic times, they cannot go back home. Some have been stuck in Hong Kong for more than 1 year, 2 year time. And the other peculiarity is that for a migrant domestic worker, their office is their home. They need to stay there for, in average, 6 days a week, 24 hours a day during their 6 working days. Even when they don't need to actually work in the sense, they still need to stay in the same place. So imagine an ordinary worker have to stay in their places of employment the whole day. You can imagine the undue pressure that one have to bear with. Another thing is that very often the foreign domestic workers, when they contracted COVID-19 or other sickness, they may face the threat of being dismissed by the employer for various excuses.
Visa and all of that.
Yeah. So although we understand that if an employer do dismiss their workers upon learning their contraction of any disease, it may be a violation of the law. But still, there are many circumstances that they may actually face such challenges, to say the least. Also, they have to face the society's misleading and sometimes really discriminatory labeling because of their cultures, or sometimes people view their behavior and accuse them of spreading the virus. So we have seen cases reported in the news. All this would add up to a heavy burden on the individual migrant workers, and then they will suffer acutely from mental pressures.
And then that adds on to their well-being. And
exactly.
Right now, there's a lot of talk on well-being, both in public and private sector. How can they take care of people's well-being? But is that being missed somehow either by government or policy or by society as a whole when it comes to non-ethnic Chinese communities in Hong Kong?
Yeah, inherently, non-Chinese speaking communities, although they occupy not a small portion, I would say, because 8% is not a few, isn't it? But still, we don't have a consistent or structured policy to safeguard their well-being, or some people say their rights. And there are also a number of reasons for that. One of the main reasons is language barrier. I mean, for example, in the early stage of the COVID time, the government has rolled out a number of measures, precaution initiative, etc. But the UC has received reports from the ethnic minority community that they were not made aware of such measures.
Right.
They don't really know the real situation, mainly because they don't understand Chinese, and some of them don't even understand English.
Yeah. Reports was also saying that there are only 21 registered social workers who are from a ethnic minority community. And if you increase that, then perhaps they'll be able to help with the outreach program and make sure that the different communities are made aware of the services available to them.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned it, because I'm given to understand that lately the government start to think that way, is to, in the future, they hope to increase the number of social workers from the recruited from the ethnic minority communities. But of course, having that idea is easy, but to implement that idea, to let it become the practice, is not that easy. Mainly because in the government regulations particularly, the knowledge and the skill on Chinese language is a must. And although we have a lot of ethnic minority members who are able to perform the duty of social workers, but they are barred from joining the government because of language barrier.
Right.
So if we need to resolve the problem, either we need to relax the requirement on the Chinese language skill, and then on a long-term basis, we really need to enhance the educational measure so that ethnic minority youngsters in Hong Kong can acquire better Chinese language skills in school.
Actually, I'm sure you're aware that a recent policy from the government for recruiting into the police workforce lowered the requirement for Chinese language. And that already saw an uptick of non-Chinese people to apply for the police workforce. So what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example, really. The police are marching ahead with the relaxation that they deem necessary. And we really hope that other departments like the Social Welfare Department, the Labor Department, or even Immigration Department, etc., these departments have a close working relationship with the ethnic minority communities. So if they can consider the practical situation and appropriately relax the language requirements so that more members from the non-Chinese speaking community can join the establishment, I think it would certainly help to enhance the situation.
Right. The tragic case that happened in Sham Shui Po with the family accident, who was a member of the non-ethnic minority community, she was actually an active case for an integrated family service center, but the case sort of was missed. And so do you think that calls for a review adjustment on how these different service centers are also doing their due diligence for members of the non-Chinese community?
I think this tragic case reflected a warning signal. That is, in our society, particularly concerning the ethnic minority community, their visibility is at stake. If we want to really resolve or to prevent such tragic scenario from happening again, we first need to identify families or individuals that needs help. So because in reality, I've been given, again, during our daily work and daily contact with the ethnic minority community, many families, or particularly the female members in the ethnic minority community, even they face acute problems in the family or their own well-being or mental health pressures. They are reluctant to seek help from members outside the family for various reasons. So it should be our responsibility to look out for them, to find them, so to say, to find them and support them in an appropriate way. And to do that properly, we need to understand better their culture, their upbringing. We shouldn't use our own customs or our own value system to judge them. That would be a wrong footing in total.
Right. And you think that would help with the integration of a streamlining help? Because it's a very fine line. There are members of the non-Chinese ethnic community in Hong Kong who say that just by increasing the number of people from those communities within the workforce or increasing the number of service centers, that necessarily would not be a bigger impact in the long term, but more to make it streamlined between what is available and how it's available to the majority of the community and for the non-ethnic, non-Chinese.
Yeah, I think all these efforts need to be coordinated, or to put it plainly, all the NGOs, stakeholders, government need to join hands.
Yeah.
For one thing, increasing the district service centers would certainly help. But then it must be equipped with, say, workers with the appropriate knowledge, with the necessary empathy, and with the skills, language and otherwise.
Yeah, that's important because obviously working with community leaders is also important, but the community leaders may not be equipped with the right skill, like you just said, of counseling, of being able to help with that stuff.
I think community leaders can take the lead in spreading the messages around and to encourage people to come together. I mean, leaders, being leaders, they have the attraction and the caliber to do so. But then we have to heavily rely on frontline workers, even social workers or even workers in all sectors, because employees or workers, they have their own families. If they can spread the message, if they can use themselves as a role model for embracing the people from different backgrounds, that will also help. So we need all hands on deck.
Mr. Chu, I'm going to pause you right there while we go for a quick break.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Ricky Chu. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking with the chairperson of the Hong Kong Equal Opportunities Commission, Ricky Chu. Mr. Chu, I understand that the EOC has launched a diversity charter in 2018, and that's been expanding lately. Can you just talk about what that charter is and its impact?
Yeah, the charter is called Racial Diversity and Inclusion Charter for Employers. So it starts in November 2018 with a mere number of 11 signatories. But then it grows in a steady rate, and at this moment we have over 340 signatories, including international consortiums to local and small enterprises. Altogether, these signatories have employed about 500,000 employees in Hong Kong. So the impact of this charter starts to be quite visible in that the employers are able to engage more conversations talking about embracing the workers in the workplace and inclusion and office DEI. And this message, in turn, are spread around by the individual employees in this organization. So overall, in the past 4 years, I think this charter has helped to enhance public awareness on why we should embrace people of a different background, particularly racial background from us, so that to make Hong Kong a real inclusive city. And this message is very important and lay the foundation of racial equality in Hong Kong.
So it adds also a sort of accountability and it consolidates everybody towards the same. Is it more about the campaign of it and consolidating?
It serves to coordinate everybody's effort from different sectors, because all these companies, organizations, they have a wide range of business, and it covers almost every aspect in Hong Kong's daily life.
Okay. What are some of the other initiatives that the EOC has been involved with regards to whether it's for the well-being of migrant workers or anything else?
Strategically, we tackle these kind of issues by adopting a three-point approach. We have the law enforcement aspect, and we have the prevention and policy promulgation aspect, and we also have the public education aspect. In practice, back in 2015, so 8 years ago, we set up our ethnic minority unit to deal with prevention and public education measures. So by way of adopting the charter and other initiative, regularly the unit would hold workshops, seminars with various stakeholders, NGOs, including government departments, to discuss all issues relating to ethnic minority communities' well-being, health issue, and how they should be provided with equal opportunities, etc.
Right.
And we make use of some special days in the year, say like the International Migrant Workers' Day, etc., to roll out campaigns. And for example, recently we engage various schools in Hong Kong, universities included, to promote an inclusive campus concept.
But that's a lot of issues for one unit, right? It's all a lot of wide-ranging issues.
This unit, in terms of staff, is not that many. We have about 6 staff, although they came from a wide profile of ethnic background. But of course, they are supported by other units in the EOC, in particular, the policy and research and training unit. So this ethnic minority unit mainly would do the reach out works. So we would introduce various training programs. Say, for example, next week, we will have a training program, a seminar for the employment agencies in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So it would be right to the point of recruitment and retention and the well-being of migrant domestic workers.
Okay. I want to talk about your background briefly. I understand you worked 35 years in the ICAC and then did a number of years at the Independent Police Complaint Council. Could you just talk about how you transferred over your experience from that into the work you've been doing at the EOC?
Yeah, well, in the beginning stage, some 5 years ago, when I first take up the post, many view me as just a law enforcement officer. But in fact, through my law enforcement career, we were not just doing arrests or prosecutions. In particular, in the ICAC, we adopt a 3-point approach, which is very similar to what we do now. We have law enforcement, we have prevention, we have public education. So I think the experience gained in those 2 organizations would facilitate me in conducting the works of the EOC quite effectively and comprehensively.
And you're dealing with the public still, right? So you understand the public in both regards.
Yeah, exactly. The good thing is that I have reached out to almost all sectors, either in government or in the business sector or in the public, in daily lives. Right. So they give me a wide range of perspectives on all the issues that I can utilize to resolve problems in my work.
Right. And since joining the EOC, can you talk about how important it is for cohesion between, like you mentioned a lot before, between the NGOs, between community leaders, and between policymakers? Is that something that is even more significant with regards to this work of equal opportunities?
Well, yeah, this kind of cohesion is really essential. For example, back in 2020 and 2021, we were trying to refine the law, and part of it relates to the race discrimination ordinance, in that we extend our scope of protection and equal opportunity in the workplace for the ethnic minorities on racial grounds. And it cannot be achieved with our own efforts solely. We need to engage the DOJ and the government department as a whole to refine the law, and we need the stakeholders in the community, the NGOs, to go to the front line, explain the law to the ethnic minority communities, and we need everyone to be aware that the law that we are going to refine is for the benefit of the whole of Hong Kong, not just the ethnic minorities. So for this particular goal, we really need, once again, everybody's joint effort.
Right. And you've been at the EOC since 2019. Can you talk about, since then to now, how far the improvements that's been made in terms of inclusiveness and integration? And what are some things that you want to, you feel the need to keep improving, that society needs to keep improving, and your department needs to keep improving going forward?
Yeah, since 2019, then I think one of the concrete improvement is that we amend the law successfully, and so that the race discrimination ordinance now provide a wider coverage on equal opportunities for people from different race backgrounds, particularly in workplace and in daily life as well. And secondly, we think by way of, for example, the growing signatories in the Charter, we successfully promote and nurture a culture amongst the business sector in particular of achieving workplace DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This has now become a major trend or major conversation focus in the business sector. And so by continuing with this kind of initiative, we have a feeling that the business sector in Hong Kong would lead the way to allow Hong Kong to become a more inclusive society for all. And also by way of our other pieces of works that have a bearing on race discrimination as well. For example, our current initiative in amending the law of sexual harassment, it also has a correlation with racial problem, because it also affects people from different backgrounds.
Right.
So in the last 4 or 5 years, I think the EOC has successfully coordinated efforts from different backgrounds of different organizations of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
All people would be more willing to join hands together to create a trend of anti-discrimination.
Yeah, because it's all interconnected, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's all, by getting the business community more involved, it helps to create more upward mobility for the youth. And what are some things down the line do you think, not just for your department, but Hong Kong as a whole, needs to keep in mind, or things that are that go under the radar that you've seen lately that needs to be addressed more, or as a whole collective for the city?
I think as a whole, we should continue to let the public be aware the importance of embracing people of different backgrounds. The benefit, we have to convince the whole society, the benefit for becoming an inclusive city is not just for the majority of the population or a certain group of community. It has to be a benefit for all. For example, if we recruit more social workers from ethnic minorities, they are not only doing works in favor of their own community, isn't it? They are actually doing works for the benefit of the whole community. That's why we have to change our mindset. Ethnic minority is part of Hong Kong. Their contribution is no different than the so-called mainstream population of Hong Kong. In fact, let's remove the word mainstream or ethnic minority. All of us are one.
Mr. Chu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. We'll see you same time next week. Goodbye.